Welcome to another edition of the GrAE Area. I'm Ask Isaiah Rhodes, and I'm here with Frank Teah. This is a special edition of the GrAE Area, considering the times we're in right now. In previous episodes, we've spoken at length about George Floyd, Breonna Taylor, and Amari Arbery, and how that has affected the climate of the country and around the world, and how it has affected sports. In the midst of all those things, a worldwide pandemic has happened, and COVID-19 has drastically shifted not just the sports world, but the world in general. So, with that said, the NBA has put forth a bubble experiment that has worked to magnificent dividends. I think, considering the fact that there's been zero positive COVID cases, they've been able to their credit, try to enhance and spread the message of education reform, um, speaking out against police brutality and systematic racism. They have done all those things, and with that said, we still have had countless amounts of police brutality, including uh, Jacob Blake, who was shot 7 times in the back in front of his children um, on August 23rd, and the league itself was driven to its knees. You had the Milwaukee Bucks, who represent the state of Wisconsin. This incident happened in Kenosha, Wisconsin. The Bucks, their plan to stand up and fight against this was to boycott their Game 5 matchup against the Orlando Magic, and that reverberated all throughout the sports world, and the league had to shut down for 3 days because of it. So I'm here with Frank. We're going to discuss it and the uh, the ramifications that came after it. So Frank, what are your thoughts on how everything formed and how the league handled it?
Yeah, first and foremost, prayers to Jacob Blake's family, right? As well as all the victims of police brutality. That was I hate to compare videos, but when we talk about gruesome, that's amongst the hardest things that we've had to watch, right? In addition to some of the other ones, right? So that was tough. That was really. Then what happened after that is subsequently the 17-year-old killing two protesters and wounding one with a gun, not being able to legally carry that, and also being like allowed to walk by the cops is just like the reason why people continue to march, fight, scream, yell, and advocate, right? So that's first and foremost. I think I mean, a lot can be said about what the plan was to follow up, but I think the players did a pretty courageous thing, right? I'm like, if this only gets people talking more, right? Because yes, this is a constant conversation, right? But I think doing what they did just showed them that yeah, we here in the Dublin, Florida, right? We're all safe here, right? We have millions of dollars. Our families are probably going to be good, right? But we're not okay with this. It's not okay. So I think that them using that platform to decide we're not playing. I think that was big, and that's something that we haven't seen in sports almost ever, but specifically in like the modern history of sports, right? That's just not a thing that we see. So we see Kaepernick kneeling for the flag. We see how courageous the women from the WNBA are. We see how courageous the women from the US soccer team are as well. But we've kind of never seen people saying, "I'm not playing. I'm just not playing." Right? And I think what followed from that was WNBA didn't play that day. Some baseball games were canceled, which is a really conservative sport, like being America's pastime and having roots in somewhat in Middle America. That was big for them as well. Then you had Naomi, top tennis star saying I'm not playing, and then I believe the NHL followed like a day or two later, and they may have. Maybe I'm wrong, but they may have decided not to play a game, to play some of their games as well, right? So that's like, whoa, that's a predominantly white sport. So I think that regardless of what comes tomorrow or next week, I think what the players decided to do in that moment was pretty monumental, right? And yes, the Jacob Blake story was a story in the news, right? But you know, COVID's going on, hurricanes are happening. It can get like unfortunately drowned out. But I think that when they do this, the convo continues, right? Like this is a gathering story. ESPN has on ESPN, which is a sporting news station, has only been talking about this, right? Because there's no sports to cover. So I think that to have these injustices that communities of color have dealt with since the beginning of this country, right? To have some of those cries on a live station over and over does awareness is the most that some folks can hope to do, right? Because we can't make policy, right? We can only hope that our cries are heard by people who can. So I think it was a pretty big thing for him to do, and I commend and applaud them for that.
Well, in our previous conversations, we spoke about potential reservations for the bubble. A lot of people who were in the fight against systematic oppression felt that sports would be a distraction. And to your point about the awareness, the NBA, in trying to move this forward, very vehemently pointed out to the players that they would use the platform to bring awareness and make sure that they got the messages across as best they could. When this happens while they're playing, I think it's a much bigger conversation, because when they're faced with the opportunity to continue to play or stop, they chose to stop regardless of the financial ramifications, even though it was for a short period of time. In that moment, they showed the solidarity that I think that many people who had reservations, they showed the solidarity necessary to get things going, whether it be small, whether it be incremental or large. I think for the league to now, in the face of all of this, they've been forced to, or I wouldn't say forced, but they've been called to the carpet. What are you doing that is not just reactionary? What are you doing that's proactive? So that now all NBA league arenas will be voting spots for this upcoming election in 2020, which is a huge, um, which is huge in terms of progress. In terms of how it all evolved, we spoke about the Bucks being the team that started it, but how do you think in terms of how it evolved from just the Bucks to the whole team? How do you feel about how it all came together?
I mean, I think that's how fire league started, right? I think, and I hate to use it for lack of a better term, peer pressure is real, right? If you have the Bucks, the top seed in the East, not playing a basketball game, Giannis there, right? Then like everybody else is like, I don't want to be, like stood up, right? Or I don't want to be, out. I got front line, and also I do believe some players already had reservations about playing, right? I think LeBron had alluded to the fact that we can't even enjoy this playoff win because we think about this, right? And that's not fair. So I do believe players will probably like think it's 3 players, 3 not. But I think when all it takes is somebody to throw the first rock, saying, "Oh, we're gonna do it." Cool. Now we can all do it, right? And I do applaud players for falling in line and say, "Okay, that's them. Let's play." Everybody decide basketball for that day. It's just not a good thing. Y'all don't respect people who without skin tone, without skin color. You're not gonna enjoy us running, shooting, dunking, dribbling, right? Not for today, right? So I think that was real. And also some of the Bucks have been victims of police brutality, right? There's the John Henson thing a few years back. There's the Sterling Brown incident. There's Tavo Sevolosha, who I don't think he was a Buck, but
No, he's on Houston now. He was on Atlanta when it happened.
Yeah, but teammates from there. So yeah, so people always have this belief that why y'all advocate, why y'all complaining, y'all giving me the dollars. That don't stop nothing. Just today, yesterday, Brandon Marshall got caught the cops on for trying to enter his new home, right? So the NFL wide receiver. So the cops don't, unless you're somebody like LeBron or Shaq, a big celebrity, the cops don't know people like a Malcolm Brogdon or something, right? So they're susceptible to the same type of racial profiling that any other black person is. So I think we really have to. I mean, it's typically like white racists saying, "What do you have to complain about? Y'all getting millions of dollars." But the threat is imminent for everybody with this hue, and for that reason, that's enough for them to be in arms about and to speak out against.
Well, as we speak, you're starting to see more marches. You see marches on Washington D.C. now. You're starting to see you mentioned the protesters in Wisconsin and things like that. So now that you see more uprisings similar to what we saw with George Hill, and you're starting to see the incremental progression, whether it be small or big, um, going forward, knowing the impact that this has made, do you see that follow? Do you see other sports following suit in a similar fashion, not just outside of this, but in other instances as well?
Um, I, I don't know about the plan to boycott. I think that was a this week thing. What would have been really interesting to see is if the players have done this next week when the NFL was starting to
Hmm.
see what they would have done, right? Because that would have been really big. Because as we know, the NFL has been a league that's kind of really like tried to mute the voices of athletes speaking out against this, right? Players were there was talks of finding players for kneeling, having come to have a job. So I think that if this could have pushed players in the NFL to boycott as well, that would have been like really, really eye opening, right? I do think that players and leagues will push the envelope more, right, to demand more from their league, their owners their owners, and also their fans, right? I do think that you will, especially in the NFL, right, because that's a league that kind of unfortunately does the best job at making sure that players aren't too outspoken against these causes. You will see players, I think, saying more and speaking out more and making their owners and their fans more uncomfortable than they have in the past, right? Especially considering that what Kaepernick did was only 4 years ago, right? I think you will see a complete change of the league. And Brian Urlacher is a clown. He's just a clown. But I mean, I think that speaks to the fact that somebody could play with you, dab with you, cry with you, be in the same shower room, locker room, laugh, and still not understand your plight, and it's crazy. But I am happy that the Chicago Bears just allowed them to like, nah, or like don't speak for us. And I mean, and we did not that line of thinking.
I mean, at this point, you have to. We spoke about this when we spoke about Drew Brees.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a lot of teams, brands, and just overall entities that are going to be forced to step out there. They can't play the company line. You have to, in all facets, distance yourself from anything that goes against these times. I mean, this has been going on for years, but in 2020 specifically with social media and things of that nature, and how cancel culture has come to fruition at such a prominent rate, if
Mm-hmm.
you get caught in between in any way, shape, or form, it's gonna be it's not gonna be to your benefit.
Nope.
So, you mentioned the Bears. We got the Baltimore Ravens who have come out, and their statement was amazing. Let me just pull that up for you. When you hear this, especially from an NFL team,
Mm-hmm.
for them to step out, let me just get this together for you right now. Baltimore. So, peep this. It says, we're yet another example of racial discrimination with the shooting of Jacob Blake and the unlawful abuse of peaceful protesters. We must, in all caps, unify as a society. It is imperative that all people, regardless of race, religion, creed, or belief, come together and say enough is enough. This is bigger than sports. Racism is embedded in the fabric of our nation's foundation and
Mm-hmm.
is a blemish on our country's history.
Mm-hmm.
If we are to change course and make our world a better place, we must face this problem head on and act now to enact positive change. It is time to accept accountability and acknowledge the ramifications of slavery and racial injustice.
Yikes! Yeah. I mean, I'm almost sure that all the team officials or the board wasn't okay with that being put out, right? But I think majority probably ended up ruling and saying okay, because I'm sure like a PR person wrote that, right? Probably a black PR person. But yeah, that was like really surprising to hear from NFL team, right? And I'm sure that rubbed a lot of folks the wrong way. But I mean, you got to hear that. We got to. It's actually maybe 3 weeks ago. on last week tonight on HBO, John Oliver show, said something really important, right? And shout out to my dope coworker Shayna. In our last class with students, she goes, the most important thing that John Oliver said today was, when trying to figure out how we got here, I think we have to understand that we got here on purpose, right? This ain't no accident, right? This just not bad apple. This is a bad tree, right? So and a bad tree will produce apples that aren't good. So that's what it is. The tree is messed up, right? And the tree is purposely tainted, right? Or the tree is not messed up. The tree is working. The tree is producing exactly what it wants to produce, right? And exactly what's supposed to produce, right? That's nature. Like, this country was never meant for people who weren't white, right? And weren't white adjacent, right? So yeah, people were 3/5 of a person before. People were after slavery. People like weren't let me recognize, right? Segregation lasted. Went on after slavery. You have in North Carolina. You have the first coup in America to be to take out black leaders in Carolina. Carolina to take them out of office and put white folk there. So yeah, this is not like this is. I mean, I don't know how much folks want to convince themselves that the country or the nation really isn't that bad. We just have a few mistakes. No, like it's all bad, right? And it's purposely all bad. And you need to acknowledge that, because people are literally dying because of how bad things are in this nation, right? Or how deep racism runs. So this is cool from the Ravens. The Ravens a few years ago had the chance to sign Kaepernick, and it talks that Ray Lewis has something to do with him not being signed. So I do want to see how him and their rhetoric has changed going forward. But yeah, I mean, I think that was a cool, first statement. Let's see the action that they do. They do going forward. Like, I want to see what happens this season. But yeah, that was a pretty powerful statement, right?
And speaking of actions, I just want to run down what the league has initiated as the byproduct of what this boycott was, just in more complete terms. The NBA and its players have agreed to immediately establish a social justice coalition with representatives from players, coaches, and governors that will be focused on a broad range of issues, including increasing access to voting, promoting civic engagement, and advocating for meaningful police and criminal justice reform. In every city where a league franchise owns and controls the arena property, the governors will, when I say governors, I mean team governors, for those who aren't aware. Governors will continue to work with local election officials to convert the facility into a voting location for the 2020 general election to allow for a safe in-person voting option for communities vulnerable to COVID. If a deadline has passed, team governors will work with local election officials to find another election-related use for the facility, including but not limited to voter registrations and ballot receiving boards. The league will work with players in 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 our network partners to create and include advertising spots in each NBA playoff game dedicated to promoting greater civic engagement in national and local elections and raising awareness around voting access and opportunity. So when you hear those things, considering where we started and where we are now, do you feel like the bubble has been able to, from an action standpoint, do you feel like the bubble was a success?
Yeah, I think that they've been good so far about the messaging, and the graphics, and I think that that's pretty cool, right? Voter suppression is real, right? It's a thing. Gerrymandering is real, right? I would like to see, and this is just like not critique, but I would want to see the league in the future, in the near future, be vocal about criminal justice reform, right? Because we know a lot of the roadblocks to voting is former felons not being able to vote, right? So restoring their voter rights and doing it without a tax like Florida did, right? So I think that's a logical next step, right? To making sure that some felons can now vote, right? Because democracy, voting is a hallmark of democracy, right? So that's the case. People who live under this should be able to vote. So I think that's cool. Especially the polling centers. I think that they create more jobs for folks, right? Who have to work the polls. So I do think that could be a cool thing. I also hope that they find a way to keep centers even during non general elections, right? So for local elections, that would be cool too. The NBA partners with whoever in their city, and to make sure that they have like accessible local voting polls for local elections, in addition to big national general elections. So yeah, I think that's a good job, right? And shouts to LeBron and his team on more than a vote, because a few years ago Taylor Swift did something big with voting, right? And I think like in like maybe 24 or so hours they got 65,000 folks registered to vote. Yeah, a few years back. I forget what year it was, maybe in 2017 and 2018. But that was I don't want to give praise Taylor Swift too much on this, but that was something big that she did for voting, right? And I think LeBron did something equally as well, especially for a demographic of people who are impacted the most by policy or lack thereof. So I think it's really cool what the league is doing in terms of that, and it's something tangible that they can do right away, because we're for equality, just a march towards it, right? Like it won't be remedied next week, next year, right? But I think that you ask what steps should be taken moving forward and what can be done now, and I think that making sure folks have the access to vote and are allowed to vote as efficiently and without roadblocks as possible is a thing. So yeah, that's dope.
Now I want to point to and bring a lot of things full circle. A lot of people are championing Kyrie Irving in connection to this, and I just want to get your thoughts. I want to say something before you go about it in regards to while Kyrie Irving, who's on the Brooklyn Nets, he was injured prior to the bubble. While he did speak up and say that he didn't feel that we should come back and play, a lot of his concepts were misguided in the fact that it had no real plan. And while he did advocate for us not to come back due to systematic injustice, it wasn't in connection to what's really happening right now. And I say that to say, when he initially came up with the point to not play, he was saying it in the 25th hour, not really organized in trying to generate something very similar to, in stark contrast to Avery Bradley, who came with appointed demands for the league and presented it to the league. Now, with that said, if the league is not in action right now, we don't get what we got.
Nope.
Over the last 3 days, we don't get the type of coverage we got. While during this conversation we pointed out everything that the league has done. None of this is happening without the platform of the vote, and I think that Charles Barkley, a lot of different people who have had a platform have spoken out and said, in contrast to what Kyrie said, once you have a platform, you don't give it away. If the NBA players weren't playing right now, we wouldn't be having this conversation.
Nope.
So I just wanted to get your thoughts on that in comparison to what's happening right now.
Yeah, right. I think thank you for saying that, for sure. I think people are we know, speaking about sports so passionately for years, that people have this revisionist history, right? Where they extract the parts that they want to remember and not the other parts, right? So Kyrie is somebody who wasn't allowed to come to the bubble anyway. Like, they didn't want him to come. They told him, no, don't come, right? And also, you have to think, if Kyrie's not hurt, if KD's not hurt, if Brooklyn has a legit shot, is he speaking the same? And the answer is probably not, right? So Kyrie had done some cool things in the community, right? But when they had the call to speak about his plans and stuff, people say he rambled, right? Like, it was a bit confusing. And then he spoke about them even starting a new league. Like, huh? So if they started a new league, would he also not want to play in that because this is going on, or is it just the NBA? So it was really weird to see where he was going. People are praising him like he was right. No, I think multiple things can be true at one time. He did suggest not going. That was wrong, right? And players did boycott the past 2 or 3 days. But if he, like you said, if they didn't go like he suggested, they would all be individuals at their home tweeting and making stuff on Instagram that yes is powerful and it helps as well, but you wouldn't be able to see them visibly upset and deciding not here, not today, we're not playing, right? So their leverage is being on the court, right? Is having all of is people getting commercial ads and stuff during their heavily watched games. Those don't happen if they don't play, and that couldn't happen if they weren't here in the first place. So I think people are like mixing probably what they thought Kyrie meant, right, or what they hoped he meant versus what actually happened. And now saying, yeah, I was right. And also the boycott lasted 2-3 days. Players are not gonna not play anyway. They didn't play to prove a point. I mean, and I think that message is heard loud and clear. So I think we have to stop giving credit where credit isn't due. I don't want to doubt the how well intentioned he was, but I don't know if it came from the self-sacrificial place that he wants us to believe it did, and that's just that. It also a lot of it also didn't make sense. His statement was, "I'm not with all this systemic injustice and BS. Something smells fishy." What smells fishy? Like, do you believe the league is out to get you? Like, I think too often we can point to Kyrie's statements and say this is confusing, right? And I think the reasoning behind his stance at the time was also confusing, and that isn't to be I think misguided or folks aren't to be led to believe that this is what he envisioned all along because it isn't.
Now you mentioned leverage.
Mm-hmm.
We speak at length over air in regards to how over the last 20 years the NBA player outside of any other athlete has leveraged better than and more effectively than any athlete ever, right?
Mm-hmm.
A lot of that has had to do with how LeBron and just the next generation has been able to establish their brands business while still being top-notch athletes.
Mm-hmm.
Outside of being an athlete and just having this voice, in what ways can they use that, to benefit the communities? I know a lot of people put a lot of pressure on them to be somewhat politicians in ways that they haven't or not well versed in really being, but they can still affect the community outside of just being an athlete. So in what ways do you see that maybe they can utilize this outside of it just being a moment in time, but going forward?
Yeah, so I think one these are folks with large platforms, right? So I think one, just reading, right, and being educated on certain matters, right? I think the more educated you are, the more you can speak to the thing, right? So I think if they take the time and to learn about things or to seek understanding for certain things, and they take that back to their following, I think that they're open the eyes or they create more awareness about some issues that are important. So that's one way, right? I think they have large individual platforms that I think folks can benefit from, right? That's one. Another thing is we often ask rich folks what should they do with their money. And some people could see people for being too rich, and I understand all of that, right? And I think all that comes from a very real and valid place. But I think that one thing they could do is invest in some of these community orgs doing work in these marginalized neighborhoods, right? So after school programs, financial literacy programs, things of that nature, right? You have a lot of really good community orgs doing a lot of good work, and funding always isn't available or isn't as much as it should be for them. So I think if these players can take some of the money that they get and put it towards that, then I think that that's a really helpful thing to do, right? And also start coalitions, right? So the NBA starting a social justice coalition, but there's nothing stopping folks from doing that in their own cities, right, and own communities and back home. community centers. All those things help, right? All those things give folks things to do. It helps in moments of inactivity, and I think those are really powerful things. So yes, they all can create schools and stuff, right? That's just like there's just way more people, right? But if they could push some of these things to the forefront and speak about it more frequently, not just when elections come up, I think that's also a real powerful thing that they could do as well.
Definitely. I feel like, to your point about like just education and trying to, help nonprofit organizations or just different organizations that try to bear the brunt of a lot of education outlets and activities. If the star player holds the team accountable, the owners accountable to allocate money towards that, the team funding can be utilized toward that, league funding can be utilized toward these communities, then that's the type of leverage that they can use. That's real tangible. This voting thing that we're seeing, that's tangible action. But in terms of to give people some ease in how athletes may be using their money or using their leverage, that can go a long way. So great points there, and let's see how this goes. I mean, this is 2020. 2020 has been a truly impactful, influential, and game-changing year in a lot of ways.
Quite the ride, yeah.
So let's just see how this turns out. We still got another 3.5 months left, so it's only time will tell. But with that said, Frank, thank you for tapping into the gray area with your insight and so much more. Where can people reach you?
Reach me at Enoch is Enoch, both on IG and Twitter, and I'm Frank Teah on Facebook.
Most definitely. I'm Ask Isaiah Rhodes. This is the gray area. Stay tuned for much more, not only as we follow sports, the NBA. Stay tuned for more interviews, and I'll be back with more content. Thanks for watching. Peace.